the new reward.
That's
NFT.
what we're going to start with anyway, since we're going to start with OpenSea.
Hey! We're back with another episode. It's Hump Day, my favorite day of the week, often. Other than maybe Friday. Friday's always good because then the next day is Saturday. But we're back with another episode. Go FUD Yourself. JD Gagnon here, my good friend Kiara. What's going on?
Hello.
Hola. What are we talking about?
Well, it is Degen Day, so we got to talk about tokens, but we're not talking so much about altcoins as Bitcoin and ETH. But before that, we got to talk about NFTs and how OpenSea is not doing so hot. And then in terms of Bitcoin, we're going to talk about some new ETF components. And then we're kind of going into ETH because of the LVH thing that's going around. Sorry, LHV.
Yeah. Exciting stuff to talk about today. It is Degen Day. I think there's some... It's interesting because it's a lot of actual, like, somewhat negative news that we've been seeing over the last few days, which is really interesting. And
we had a good Tuesday, remember? We had a bad Monday, good Tuesday, bad Wednesday.
That was just because you were finally not grumpy. One day of you not being grumpy, the whole tone of the show changes. It's crazy. Anyways, we're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the major venues, all that banana. Just like, share, subscribe, help us get the word out. I've got no merch on today. I'm not even wearing a shirt under my hoodie, so that's strange. So no merch, not sponsored by anybody. You don't look like you are either.
Still here. Nope.
So we're good. Let's freaking go. Song kind of make you want to like grab a frozen drink and sit in a hammock?
Absolutely. I was thinking about how summery it is and how not summery it is here.
It's summery here, so maybe I'll go sit in a hammock later because I can. But anyways,
I shovel my sidewalk.
Yeah, you go shovel your sidewalk. I'll sit at the beach. We'll call it a day. All right. What do we got going on?
We're going to start with OpenSea. So their valuation has been reduced by 90%, which, okay, I have to say is not surprising considering the marketplace of NFTs right now and all of the fun that we talked about yesterday with Bored Apes and that kind of thing. But it still is not a good look.
So this is an artifact. In my opinion, this is more a signal of poor decisions last cycle than it is of poor momentum this cycle. So OpenSea, which has to be one of the biggest rounds I've ever seen in blockchain, raised $300 million at a $13 billion valuation. $13 billion. Now, OpenSea had incredible revenue and incredible user growth. And if I was them, I would have raised a monster round at a monster valuation also. So you can't blame them for doing it. Take whatever opportunity presents itself, of course. That being said, I think to anybody with a brain, this makes perfect sense that it's plummeted 90%. Every token in the space almost, with the exception of maybe ETH and Bitcoin, is down over 90%. So why anybody would think another business that is 100% connected to the success of blockchain and the crypto industry wouldn't be down 90% or more is shocking to me. But this, I think, is even more obvious. It's such an exorbitant valuation. Why Paradigm led these rounds? This is an interesting thing also. I don't want to digress too much, but there's a lot of these funds now that raise monster funds, A16, Polychain, Pantera, et cetera, et cetera. They raise these like multi-billion-dollar funds. So the only way to actually place all that capital is to go later stage. And for whatever reason, we see these like insanely overvalued rounds. And it almost feels like it's because the venture capitalists just want to deploy some cash and get the carry and hope for the best. Like, it's kind of crazy. This makes no sense. Why anybody valued this at $13 billion? I don't understand. I don't get it.
Well, that's because they were selling 176,000 NFTs a week, and now, they're not. So
I mean, OpenSea was printing money. Absolutely. It's a great idea. They expanded nicely. They've got a huge war chest now. They're not going anywhere. Yeah, valuations are down. I think a lot of this is just trying to dampen some excitement around blockchain right now.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening with this next one too, which is that there are a couple of mining companies that analysts are saying are overvalued. So the companies themselves are Marathon Digital and Riot Platforms. And I mean, yeah, they might be overvalued, but they received a valuation and they haven't received a new one yet. So it's just kind of funny.
I mean, there's a few reasons for this. Hardware got insanely expensive for a while because of all the AI rush and all this stuff. And NVIDIA was printing money, of course, with all of their graphics cards that are used in many of these mining rigs. It is getting slightly cheaper over time to purchase some of this technology. The problem is, and the reason that some of these valuations are probably going down, is the halving is coming. And so in theory, the same operation, well, not in theory, in actuality, the same activity gets you half the yield when the halvings happens. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things that factor in there that offset some of that 50% reduction in revenue. But until we understand the demand growth and the price and valuation growth of Bitcoin, you have to factor that uncertainty into the valuation of crypto mining companies. Again, the reason I'm kind of annoyed by these articles is I feel like they're trying to imply there's a fire somewhere, but there's not even smoke.
But there isn't.
Yeah.
The other reason that people are saying perhaps these mining companies were overvalued is that companies like big BlackRock and other big institutions were starting to invest in them as they were trying to get their own Bitcoin ETF, et cetera. So yes, they might have been overvalued for a little bit, but also those people haven't pulled out. So that value is still there.
Yeah. I mean, the mining business, if you're big enough and you have economies of scale, still can be quite profitable if you have efficient energy resources and all this stuff. So, I mean, the crypto mining valuations are probably more in line with traditional valuations than every other aspect of crypto. So this is probably a more healthy market to begin with. Yeah, valuations are down a little bit. No shit.
Okay, on the other hand, we are seeing new entrants in some ways to Bitcoin, which is not what you typically hear about. You hear about people who've been invested for a long time. You hear about people who've been mining for a long time. We're hearing institutions having new innovations, quote unquote, innovations like ETFs with Bitcoin, but we don't see a lot of new platforms surrounding them. So I thought this was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's another custody provider, Bitcoin custody in particular. As far as I understand, it's a regulated entity in the US, which is exciting.
So Custodia Bank will actually be able to provide legal custody of Bitcoin to quite a few different states, although not every state.
Yeah, there's a few states I think that you can't custody Bitcoin yet. New York is one of them, I think. I can't remember. All of that to say, I mean, custody's kind of been an interesting one. We all thought for the longest time that the quote unquote custody providers in the space were legal regulated custody. It's actually not. They're providing a similar service, but they weren't regulated, nor was it officially compliant. I believe some of them have now come into compliance, but there's going to be a massive custody in TradFi is massive. And some arguments could be made as to why the need for custody won't be as important in blockchain because self-custody is common, but there's a lot of enterprise and institutional applications where they cannot custody digital assets currently. So legally, and if they're depending on if they have a banking license, that's another thing. Often if you're a bank, you can't custody these digital assets because it goes against some of your other charter requirements. So anyways, all of that to say, I like seeing new custodians. Caitlin Long obviously is an old school Bitcoin OG. So I think probably also just good PR wise and momentum wise for the space. I think it's great. I love it. I like seeing this stuff. We're going to see a lot more of this. I mean, I'm really excited about going into a season of I Told You So because the last season was everybody was able to say that to me.
Very on brand for you. You're going to have to change your Twitter handle from Diamond Rock to Told You So.
It told you so? No, well, because everybody's been telling me so this last year. I was very wrong on when I thought the bear was going to come and how. And so I've had 2 years of reminders how wrong I was. So I can't wait to remind everybody else how right I am about this because I think, especially Q1 24, MiCA starts coming online in the EU. Like a lot of these regulatory structures start to have some teeth now. They're not fully implemented or completely launched in any jurisdiction, I don't think, except for maybe Canada. But yeah, there's real legs on a lot of this stuff. I think we're going to see a lot of new entrants start to pop up all over the place. And all of a sudden, everyone will be like, how did we not know regulation was coming? And I'll be like, we've been fucking telling you for months, years at this point that it's coming. Anyways, we digress.
We're also seeing, I think, as we see more people come on chain and as we see more institutions come on chain, then people trust them more. And so we do see different things happening with tokens that have been around for a while. And one of those tokens is ORDI, which is Bitcoin ordinals.
So we've talked about this a few times.
Yeah, we have.
I don't get it personally. Like I understand what an ordinal is and why people want specific ones, but it kind of just reminds me of the PFP craze. Like people are paying extraordinary amounts of money for these ordinals. Are they actually going to matter? There's a few that probably will.
Well, the concept I think is broader than that, right? So the ordinals protocol lets people embed data onto Bitcoin specifically, that's NFT data. And so that's why you're thinking of it as PFP. And although right now we talk a lot about digital art, maybe it will allow for more multi-chain activity in the future for other NFT utility, or maybe not. Maybe it's just a PFP craze.
There's a lot of applications of ordinals, I think, that we have yet to scratch the surface, but where most people were, I think, participating early on was trying to get like numbered ordinal. They didn't really care what it was as long as the number was low enough, or like 8888 or whatever. So there's like some weird shit that's been going on with ordinals. I never really got into the hype train, but there was a lot of people that made a pile of money on it. So to each their own, I suppose. This being said, 50% surge in the last 24 hours after being listed on Binance. It's kind of interesting. Often when things get listed on Binance, they don't pump that much anymore because it's actually, for a lot of their holders, it's a liquidity opportunity to dump into liquidity. But so this is good. I mean, the value of ordinals, as far as I understand them, and I'm definitely not an authority on them, is tied quite directly to the value of Bitcoin. And again, the common consensus, which is probably why it's going to be wrong, but common consensus is we're probably going to get an indication from the SEC prior to Thanksgiving when and how things are going to get approved from an ETF perspective. And for that reason, there's a lot of expectation that Bitcoin's going to see some positive times. And so if you're an ordinals participant, then that should waterfall down to benefit to you. So probably a few factors here. Being listed on Binance is definitely not a small one.
No. And although, so I kind of expected with ordinals seeing a big surge that we would see Bitcoin have a surge too, but that hasn't been the case.
Yeah, but I think Bitcoin is just trying to figure out when and how to address this ETF thing. Like a lot of people suspect that a lot of the ETF approvals have been priced in now. I don't think so. I think there's still a ton of uncertainty. And until we have any definitive answer, like we've been hearing / talking about Bitcoin ETFs, I have been since 2016.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we're talking 7 years of this. So I think to a certain extent, people are just like, hey, we've heard this song and dance 1,000 times. And as a space, we've had 1,000 times that we thought for sure this was the time it was going to get approved. And it wasn't. So I think Bitcoin is just kind of waiting to figure it out. There's some positive momentum that shot it up from 30 to 34 or 35 or whatever it's at today. I haven't looked today. But I mean, so that's a little bit of excitement, 10, 15%. But I don't think we're going to see any like crazy movement until we have some definitive catalysts. Excuse me.
People do think that there might be a bit more volatility though. So the crypto options market has hit 20.64 billion in notional open interest in Bitcoin and Ether options, but 4.5 billion worth of Bitcoin and Ether options expire today.
Yeah. This is kind of always the case. This is obviously another time frame when options are sought after. And I think that's just given the uncertainty. If you're trying to hedge a position If you're uncertain about a position, but you still want to have some exposure, you're going to hedge. And so often they're hedging with options. The problem with options is it can be somewhat self-fulfilling. So if something goes the direction we as a space don't want it to go, it continues to cascade because of the options that now become in the money, that are established. The swaps and transactions have to happen, which drives the price further, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And further down and continue, or the same in the reverse. If you're expecting the price to go down and something goes up like crazy, the further it goes up, the more options kick in, the more it goes up, and it exacerbates the problem. So this is a non-zero risk. It's definitely something that we need to pay attention to. I'm kind of surprised that Deribit has 20 billion in
says they have 90% of.
Yeah, they do. They're probably the only reputable options, centralized options platform at the moment. There's some really cool decentralized ones. Our friend Patrick has a beautiful platform for options on Avalanche called Arrow. Shout out to Arrow, Arrow Markets. So check it out if you're into options. But yeah, no, I think this is pretty standard. And we are at one of those inflection points. Yes. I think either they're not going to announce the ETF, at which point everything's going to dump, in my opinion, yes. Because it's kind of been expected, at least that 10 to 15%. And if it is announced that there's an ETF, then it's going to go the other direction. So the uncertainty, the probabilities of both directions are pretty high at the moment. And so for that reason, people are hedging. Same thing in 21. Why in November 21 was it like this? Peak froth. Everybody was hedging to the downside. What happens if the bull's over in November, which is common? November is a very common month for things to turn to shit because of tax loss harvesting and all this other stuff that people do in the last couple months of the year. So anyways, it's pretty standard. I think, again, this indicates something that we already know, and that is it's a pretty important inflection point ahead of us.
Okay, on these strategies, though, there's something a little bit new and different that got announced on November 2nd. So ProShares actually launched a short Ether strategy ETF.
The problem with this is the same as leverage futures. Essentially, well, it is a leverage future. And so it's not as exciting as a spot ETF, obviously, which is why they get approved. This is just numbers on a screen. It's not as important for the value and price of ETH, obviously, as the Bitcoin ETF. Spot ETF is going to be for the price and value of Bitcoin. That being said, people are looking for more liquid, more cost-effective ways to hedge positions. And so if you have a short ETF, there's deep liquidity, transaction costs are pretty low, it's regulated, it's safe, you know it's safe, you can hedge your positions. And so I think we're probably seeing, again, a lot of that. What if the Bitcoin thing isn't approved? What does that mean for Bitcoin and by extension ETH and everything else? Values go down. Why would you want to have a short position open via an ETF? Well, if the markets go down, then you're not losing any money because it should offset, in theory, it should offset the loss of the long position that you have. Anyways, all of this to say, this is cool. I think more options like this need to exist. Options was a term used loosely, but there's these derivatives are super important in capital efficiency and just a functional financial ecosystem. So this to me is great. I'm always looking for highly liquid, properly managed opportunities to hedge. So
it's interesting because we talk about how these are important for when token go down, but people kind of forget about them when token go up. So and ETH is going up, not that it's going to match, it hasn't matched the percentage wise of Bitcoin, but it has gone up substantially in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you believe that ETH is probably going to go up, then you're probably going to have a long option. Meaning if it goes up, you can sell at a certain price or whatever, put, or depends how you structure it. But you can really play this for both directions, and the key is to hedge your position. So it makes sense on the way down. It also makes how you're assessing it. But in order to hedge both up and down movements, you have to have derivatives. You have to have futures. So
okay, let's end on this really weird crypto Twitter note It's not like it's only on crypto Twitter, but I have seen it blow up on there pretty substantially. So the founder of LHV Bank, which is out of Estonia, apparently has 250,000 Ether valued today at just over 470 million USD. And he lost his wallet. He lost his seed phrase.
Yep. This kind of reminds me of the guy that lost his seed phrase in the dump. And then
I think about that all the time.
spent a bunch of years trying to find it, then got a company to tear apart the dump, and they found it, and it was Bitcoin Cash, not Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Or something. Bitcoin BSV, some shit. Anyways, this is kind of crazy. Part of me feels like you look at Mount Gox, you look at Quadriga in Canada. I mean, that's a lot of money. Like, and was it all his, or did was some of it someone else's? And is it some of it actually spent? Like, there's Estonia, like.
I know. He said he's willing to share the funds with anyone who can help him recover the lost keys.
Well, you need.
And he is fairly well connected. So the Coinbase director, Connor Grogan, has been posting about it as well. So maybe it's legit, maybe it's not legit. But if it is legit and they never recover it, it's an interesting component that this Bitcoin will just sit there forever.
ETH. But yeah, there's an argument. I don't remember the exact number, but something like 1 million or more Bitcoin are actually suspected to be lost, and in many people's minds are considered out of circulation because they, in fact, can never be recovered. I mean, I suppose if you zoom out and look at a long enough time horizon, that's part of it's a feature in a lot of ways, I think.
Definitely creates scarcity in ways that we maybe hadn't predicted when
it's
right?
In an indirect way, continuously deflationary over time, because more and more tokens are lost and you can't recover them. You can, in fact, break the encryption of cryptocurrencies if you have quantum computing. That's a real risk factor that we're all kind of thinking about. Like, if and when quantum computing is available to people other than the U.S. military and other militaries, that'll be a real problem, because the encryption standards of blockchain is not good enough to withstand that. So it's possible. You might not find it now, but he might find it in a few years. Hopefully he's the first one that finds it, as opposed to all these other malicious people trying. So we'll see. This is kind of a sad, this sucks. 470 million is a lot of money.
It does suck. It's just, But then again, when these things come up, I always query the validity behind them. But then if they are valid, what does it mean for the ecosystem?
You've been holding it for 7 to 8 years. You're the manager of a bank. You understand custody and security better than most. If you've had it for that long and it's worth that much, are you you're not using key sharding, you're not using multi-sigs, you're not using any of that for 470 million?
Right.
Like, we don't do that for like 100 grand.
Right.
Like, 470 million is obnoxious. Anyways, so it's a lesson to be learned. I mean, there's tons of different platforms actually that are starting to emerge from like a succession perspective too. Is how do you transfer these assets to your heirs, and how does that work? And who has the keys, and who's going to facilitate that? There's a lot of companies actually that are focused specifically on that, and many more companies that are focused specifically on private key abstraction and building much more secure structures for holding your assets than this. So this is unfortunate. If anything, take it as an example of what not to do.
Absolutely. There you go.
I feel
that's our Wednesday Degen news. It's a lot of Bitcoin, a lot of ETH, so not super altcoiny, but still impacts whatever you're holding.
Degen news. Bitcoin has stayed the same. ETH has pretty much stayed the same. There's some people thinking both might probably go up. Ordinal's down, or Ordinal's up, and OpenSea's down.
OpenSea's down. Yeah.
And some crypto mining people are slightly overvalued. Okay, that's cool. It's a good Wednesday. It's a good week. Tomorrow is crypto arms race. Whoop, whoop. So we're going to fly all over the place. Hopefully we're going to get the nice jet this time. And yeah, live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the venues. So just like, share, and subscribe. Please help us out. And with that, today, I say to you, Kiara, go find yourself.
Go find yourself.
Bye.